Brian Wilson is an American musician who has a net worth of $100 million. Brian Wilson earned his fame and fortune as a singer and the primary songwriter for the Beach Boys. He also served as the band's manager and producer, best known as the co-founder of the Beach Boys. Hailed as a genius for his groundbreaking approach to pop music and mastery of studio production, Wilson is widely regarded as one of the most innovative and influential songwriters of the 20th century. His signature style combined lush production, intricate harmonies, layered vocals, and deeply personal or childlike lyrical themes. He was also noted for his soaring falsetto voice and his lifelong battle with mental illness. Wilson drew inspiration from a wide range of musical influences, including George Gershwin, The Four Freshmen, Phil Spector, and Burt Bacharach. He launched his professional career in 1961 with the Beach Boys, where he served as the band's principal songwriter, producer, co-lead vocalist, bassist, keyboardist, and de facto leader. After the group signed with Capitol Records in 1962, Wilson became the first pop artist widely recognized for writing, arranging, producing, and performing his music. Beyond the Beach Boys, he also produced for acts such as the Honeys and American Spring. By the mid-1960s, Wilson had written or co-written more than 24 U.S. top 40 hits, including chart toppers like Surf City, 1963, I Get Around, 1964, Help Me, Rhonda, 1965, and Good Vibrations, 1966. He is often credited as one of the first producer-auteurs in popular music and a pioneer in using the recording studio as a creative instrument in its own right. In 1964, Brian Wilson experienced a nervous breakdown and withdrew from regular concert touring, choosing instead to devote himself fully to songwriting and studio production. This shift led to some of his most acclaimed work, including Pet Sounds, 1966, widely hailed as a landmark in popular music, and his first solo-credited single, Caroline, No. He also embarked on the ambitious but ultimately unfinished album Smile, a project that would become legendary for both its innovation and its troubled history. By the late 1960s, Wilson's mental health had deteriorated and his creative output waned. He became increasingly reclusive, struggling with overreading, substance abuse, and prolonged periods of inactivity. His first major return to music came with the Beach Boys' Love You, 1977, a deeply personal and near-solo album that reflected both his vulnerabilities and idiosyncratic artistry. In the 1980s, Wilson entered into a controversial and highly controlling professional and personal relationship with psychologist Eugene Landy. Under Landy's management, Wilson released his first full solo album, Brian Wilson, 1988. He severed ties with Landy in 1991 and, beginning in 1999, resumed touring as a solo artist, continuing to perform until 2022. Wilson's innovations helped redefine popular music as a serious art form, opening the door for greater creative freedom among label-signed musicians. His early work not only captured the spirit of the 1960s but also helped shape multiple musical movements, including the California sound, psychedelia, chamber pop, progressive pop, and sunshine pop. His influence has since permeated genres as diverse as punk, outsider music, post-punk, indie rock, dream pop, emo, shibuya-kei, and chillwave. Over the decades, Wilson received numerous accolades, including multiple Hall of Fame inductions and major industry awards. He is consistently cited in critical rankings as one of the greatest and most influential musicians in the history of modern music. Early life. Brian Wilson, born on June 20, 1942 in Inglewood, California, was raised in the nearby suburb of Hawthorne in a household that was as musically rich as it was emotionally turbulent. His parents, Audrey and Murray Wilson, played pivotal roles in shaping his early life. Audrey, a gentle and musically inclined homemaker, nurtured her children's creativity and filled the home with music, often playing the organ and encouraging their vocal harmonies. Murray, a machinist and frustrated songwriter, was a far more complex presence, intensely ambitious for his sons but also domineering and emotionally volatile. While his knowledge of music theory and relentless drive pushed Brian toward early musical excellence, his controlling nature and frequent outbursts left deep emotional scars. Brian, the eldest of three brothers, Dennis and Carl being the younger two, demonstrated extraordinary musical talent from a young age. By the age of 3, he was harmonizing to melodies he heard at home, influenced by his mother's piano playing and the family's shared admiration for vocal groups like the Four Freshmen. Murray's musical aspirations led to frequent family sing-alongs, with Brian naturally taking the lead in arranging harmonies and guiding his siblings. A partial hearing loss in his right ear, likely congenital or the result of a childhood injury, never held him back. Instead, it may have deepened his sensitivity to tone, timbre, and harmonic nuance. The Wilson household, though modest and suburban, became a crucible for Brian's emerging genius, a place where creativity thrived amid emotional volatility. Murray's harsh discipline, including physical punishment, instilled both fear and motivation in Brian, who would later describe his father as both a powerful inspiration and a source of trauma. Despite the difficult environment, Brian's fascination with music only intensified. By his teenage years, he was studying jazz progressions, analyzing pop records, teaching himself piano, and composing original pieces. Though he excelled in music and sports during high school, he remained introverted and socially withdrawn, often retreating into his private world of melodies and chord progressions. This blend of maternal warmth, paternal pressure, and inner conflict laid the emotional and artistic foundation for Brian Wilson's future brilliance. It forged the sensibilities that would later define the Beach Boys' signature sound, a seamless mix of lush, idyllic harmonies and a haunting undercurrent of personal turmoil. Personal life, relationships, and family. Wilson's first serious romantic relationship was with Judy Bowles, a high school student he met at a baseball game in mid-1961. The two became engaged during Christmas of 1963 and had planned to marry the following year, though they ultimately separated before then. Bowles inspired several of Wilson's early songs, including Judy, 1962, Surfer Girl, 1963, and, according to some accounts, The Warmth of the Sun, 1964, written shortly after their breakup. By that time, Wilson had begun a new relationship with Marilyn Rovell, a young singer he met in August 1962. Inspired by a comment from Marilyn's sister Diane, Wilson wrote, "Don't Hurt My Little Sister," 1965, reflecting the early dynamics of his relationship with Marilyn. The couple married in December 1964 and had 2 daughters, Carney, born 1968, and Wendy, born 1969. Both would go on to find pop success as part of the trio Wilson-Phillips, along with Chynna Phillips. His daughters also inspired songs like Roller Skating Child, 1977, and Little Children, 1988. Much of the introspective lyrical content on Pet Sounds reflected tensions in Brian's early married life, tensions that would intensify over the years. Wilson later admitted to being an emotionally distant and neglectful husband and father. During this time, he encouraged Marilyn to pursue extramarital relationships, including one with songwriter Tandon Almer, while he engaged in affairs himself, most notably with her sister Diane, who inspired his 1978 song, My Diane, and with personal assistant Debbie Keel, the subject of The Night Was So Young, 1977. Wilson and Marilyn separated in July 1978, and he filed for divorce in January 1979. Marilyn received custody of their children and a share of his songwriting royalties. Wilson continued his relationship with Keel until 1981 and later dated his nurse, Carolyn Williams, until early 1983. In her 2013 memoir Simple Dreams, Linda Ronstadt implied that she had briefly dated Wilson during the 1970s. In 1986, Wilson began a relationship with Melinda K. Ledbetter, a former model and car saleswoman. Their initial romance ended in 1989, largely due to interference from Wilson's controversial psychologist and business associate, Eugene Landy. After Wilson cut ties with Landy in the early 1990s, he and Ledbetter reconnected and married on February 6, 1995. She eventually became his manager, guiding both his personal stability and professional resurgence. Together, they adopted 5 children. By 2012, Wilson was a grandfather to 6, 2 daughters from Carney and 4 sons from Wendy. On January 30, 2024, Melinda Ledbetter Wilson passed away. In a heartfelt tribute posted to social media, Brian wrote, "She was my savior. She gave me the emotional security I needed to have a career. She encouraged me to make the music that was closer to my heart." 1962 to 1966, the creative zenith. Brian Wilson is the Beach Boys. He is in the band. We're his fucking messengers. He's all of it. Period. We're nothing. He's everything. Dennis Wilson. Early productions and independent drive. In 1962, Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys signed a 7-year contract with Capitol Records under the supervision of producer Nick Vennett. While working on their debut album, Surfin' Safari, Wilson persuaded Capitol to allow the band to record outside of the label's inadequate basement studio. He secured the right to self-fund these external sessions and gained de facto production control, though he was not formally credited for this role. Heavily influenced by Phil Spector's production style, particularly from Spector's work with the Teddy Bears, Wilson aspired to become a behind-the-scenes auteur. With lyricist Gary Usher, he co-wrote a series of songs that mirrored Spector's sound and produced material for local acts, albeit with limited commercial success. One of his first non-Beach Boys efforts was Rachel and the Revolvers, The Revolution, a song co-written with Usher and released by Dot Records in September 1962. Tensions with his father, Murray Wilson, ultimately dissolved the Usher partnership. By mid-1962, Wilson had begun writing with radio DJ Roger Christian and guitarist Bob Norberg, who would soon become his roommate. That October, Murray Wilson's short-lived label, Safari Records, released The Surfer Moon by Bob and Sherry, the first record to list Brian Wilson as producer. The label's only other release was Humpty Dumpty, also penned by Wilson. Breakthrough and expansion. Between January and March 1963, Wilson produced Surfin' USA, the Beach Boys' second album. Preferring to focus on studio work, he began stepping back from live performances. David Marks filled in for Wilson during these absences. The title track, released as a single in March, became the band's first U.S. top 10 hit. By July, the album had reached number 2 on the Billboard chart, cementing the group's mainstream success. Despite Capitol's disapproval, Wilson began working with artists outside the label. He co-wrote Surf City with Jan Berry of Jan and Dean, which became the first surf song to reach number 1 on the U.S. charts in July 1963. While the collaboration revitalized Jan and Dean's career, it stirred conflict with Capitol and Murray Wilson, who tried unsuccessfully to halt the partnership. That same year, Wilson began producing records for the Honeys, a girl group featuring sisters Marilyn and Diane Rovell and their cousin Ginger Blake. Marketed as a female counterpart to the Beach Boys, the Honeys released several singles, though none achieved major success. Wilson grew close to the Rovell family and lived with them for much of 1963 and 1964. Their 1964 single, He's a Doll, reflected his ambition to become a major producer in the mold of Spector. Wilson was officially credited as the Beach Boys producer for the first time with the release of Surfer Girl in September 1963. The album was recorded in the summer and reached number 7 on the national chart. Shortly after, the group released Little Deuce Coupe, another Wilson-led production. As Al Jardine returned to fill in on tour, Wilson resumed occasional live appearances after David Marks left the group. By the end of 1963, Wilson had written, arranged, or produced over 40 songs for outside artists. Global recognition and personal strain. In 1964, Wilson juggled a demanding international tour schedule while writing and producing 3 albums: Shutdown Volume 2, All Summer Long, and the Beach Boys' Christmas album. A grueling Australasian tour early in the year led the band to fire Murray as their manager, although he continued to provide unsolicited guidance. The arrival of Beatlemania in the U.S. shook Wilson's confidence. Reflecting in 1966, he admitted the British invasion forced the Beach Boys to step on the gas. Their May 1964 single, I Get Around, marked their first number 1 hit and launched an unofficial rivalry between Wilson and the Beatles, particularly Paul McCartney. Its B-side, Don't Worry Baby, was later cited by Wilson as possibly the band's finest record. By late 1964, Wilson was under intense pressure. He began retreating from the Beach Boys' surf-themed material, the last of which appeared on Don't Back Down. While on a European tour, he explained to a reporter that his goal had been to craft music teens could connect with, regardless of theme. But the weight of his Mr. Everything role left him emotionally and physically drained. He was growing increasingly concerned about both the group's artistic direction and their business dealings. December 1964 breakdown and studio withdrawal. On December 23, 1964, during a flight to Houston for a U.S. tour, Wilson suffered a nervous breakdown, triggered by the stress of his recent marriage to Marilyn Rovell and the demands of his career. Although he managed to perform in Houston, Glenn Campbell was brought in as his replacement for the rest of the tour. Wilson later called this the first of 3 psychological breakdowns. In early 1965, he formally announced his withdrawal from live performances, citing burnout and his insecurities about being outpaced by Spector and the Beatles. Campbell filled in until February 1965. As a token of gratitude, Wilson produced Campbell's solo single, Guess I'm Dumb. Soon after, Bruce Johnston was hired as Wilson's permanent stand-in for live shows. Experimentation and the seeds of transformation. By 1965, Wilson had grown increasingly isolated. He moved into an apartment on Hollywood Boulevard, free from family interference. There he formed a new social circle through music industry contacts, particularly talent agent Loren Schwartz. Schwartz introduced Wilson to marijuana, hashish, and literature on philosophy and religion. These influences deepened Wilson's introspection but also strained his marriage. That year, he composed Please Let Me Wonder, his first song under the influence of marijuana. He also took LSD for the first time, describing it as a deeply spiritual and eye-opening experience. During one such trip, he conceived parts of California Girls, which he later called his favorite recording session. However, LSD use also contributed to mounting paranoia, creating further personal turmoil. Pet sounds and the push for artistic greatness. After moving into a new home in Beverly Hills in late 1965, Wilson experienced a burst of creativity. He was using multiple substances, which he acknowledged affected his emotional stability. He aimed to make music that operated on a spiritual level, laying the groundwork for what would become Pet Sounds. From January to April 1966, Wilson worked intensively with lyricist Tony Asher to create Pet Sounds. He used studio musicians for instrumentation and limited the Beach Boys' role to vocals. He later cited Let's Go Away for a While and I Just Wasn't Made for These Times as personal milestones. The album's lead single, Caroline, No, marked his first solo release and stirred speculation about a split from the group. Though critically lauded, especially in the UK, Pet Sounds did not achieve the commercial success Wilson had hoped for. This disappointment deeply affected him. Marilyn Wilson later recalled how the lukewarm public reception made Brian question his creative path, even though he couldn't stop working. At Wilson's request, Beatles press officer Derek Taylor became the band's publicist and launched a campaign branding Brian as a genius. While this elevated his profile, it also placed enormous pressure on him and created tension within the band, particularly with Mike Love and Carl Wilson. Good Vibrations and the birth of Smile. Throughout late 1966, Wilson worked obsessively on Good Vibrations, a track that would become one of the Beach Boys' biggest hits. Simultaneously, he began developing Smile, an ambitious follow-up to Pet Sounds, in collaboration with Van Dyke Parks. He called it a teenage symphony to God. But as Wilson's creative circle expanded, he lost control of the project. Parks later observed that too many people were pulling Wilson in conflicting directions. A visit from TV producer David Oppenheim, who was filming Inside Pop, The Rock Revolution, revealed what he called a playpen of irresponsible people surrounding Wilson. Illness. In February 2024, Brian Wilson was diagnosed with dementia, a major neurocognitive disorder that affects memory and cognitive functions. This led to a conservatorship in May 2024 to manage his care, as he was unable to care for himself. Cause of death. Brian Wilson passed away on June 11, 2025, at the age of 82, as announced by his family on his website and social media. However, the specific cause of death has not been publicly disclosed by his family or official sources. Given his recent dementia diagnosis and the conservatorship for his medical needs, it seems likely that his death was related to complications from this condition or other age-related health issues, though this is not confirmed. Thanks for hanging out. Share the video with your family and friends. Subscribe and click on the bell notification. Stay blessed as always.